Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you, a full review with the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly, and everything of this little guy right here. This is the Moonswatch. This is the Omega/Swatch Moonswatch collaboration. A watch, well, we'll talk more about what it is later, but anyways, it's an interesting piece. It's one of the most sort of unique things to happen in the horology world in the last few years, and so it's been a little while, but I've finally been able to get my hands on one and come to a final conclusion about that. And speaking of which, I want to thank very much my buddy Nick. Not this Nick, I'm not that crazy yet, but my buddy Nick, who is a moderator in my Discord and an overall gem of a human being, for loaning this guy my way. Up until recently, there was not a Swatch store in Southern California, so I couldn't have bought one of these guys if I wanted to. Hey, we'll get back to that later in the bed. Anyways, but Nick was able to loan this guy my way, and it was absolutely a beautiful thing. He's also had a lot of patience, because it's taken me a while to come to my conclusions as to how I actually feel about this guy. So, anyways, there's that. Let's go ahead and jump in and do a couple of size measurements right quick. This guy, if we look at the width over here with the crown, we're looking at around 43 millimeters. If we are looking at the overall width of, the diameter of the bezel, so to speak, we're right around 40. The overall, what was I going for here? Oh, yeah, the size of the face, the readable area is about 32. The thickness on this guy is actually quite svelte by Omega standards, which is not saying a whole lot, but we're at around 13 millimeters. The lug-to-lug distance, which is usually the most important number for folks with smaller wrists, we're coming in right here around 47 millimeters here. And I think that, then the lug width for installing an aftermarket bracelet, which you will basically need to do, is around 20 millimeters. So there are your measurements here. What the heck is this? You might be thinking, Nick, is this a rip? Well, actually, no one's thinking that, because this has been out for like 2 freaking years now. This has been around, it's been hyped. Everyone who knows this channel knows about it. But nonetheless, it is a collaboration between Omega and Swatch. Now, Swatch is actually interesting in that they are the Swatch group, right? And the Swatch Group owns Omega, so kind of makes sense how this would happen. But Swatch is better known for making pieces like this, which, of course, I picked up, that are not particularly high in the quality world, but are very quirky and very plasticky and a very quartz and whatnot. This is sort of the exact opposite of the Omega approach. But in many ways, that's why it caught a lot of folks off guard when this suddenly happened. These are various versions of the Moonwatch design, the Omega Speedmaster Professional. And they have done these at a price point that is $260. Mind you, there are a bunch of different variants of it. This is the Mission on Earth variety. You can see here with the Earth, but there are a bunch of other varieties out there with all kinds of different colorways, color schemes. They've actually been pretty creative with it, right? Ranging from things that look pretty much like the Moonwatch, namely the one from the mission to the moon, but then they go, completely wild like this. So, these are $260, and that compares to about $8,000 for a Sapphire Omega Moonwatch. And so that's a little bit of a reduction in price, right? And so we're going to be talking about that price a great deal here today, but that's what we got going on here. And so let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little watch right here. So, on the good side, to start with, this is actually a chrono, right? I have the chrono running right now, and we can see it's been running for about 5 minutes. I started it during my first take of the review. That ended up dying on the vine, but that's life. But I can sit here and I can pause it, right? Or I can continue and keep going, or I can reset it, etc. And all these various sub-hands work. It's worth noting that this big seconds hand here is not actually the running seconds for the watch. That's this little dial here. The big seconds hand here is actually the, stopwatch second hand. So this is a chronograph. You can use it to time things, right? And that's kind of cool. It's interesting. It's a little bit different. So anyways, we have ourselves a chronograph here, which is nice, and it has all the other functionality, namely a, hour, minute, second hand that's found on the original Moonwatch. So it's doing the Moonwatch thing, at least functionally speaking. Next thing, on the good side, the size here is quite reasonable, right? We are coming in at a relatively small size on the hand, and that's great. This, I think, is in an intermediate size range that works for a lot of folks. If you lean more towards having smaller wrists or liking smaller watches, this might feel a little bit larger, right? But that said, there are lots of folks out there with very small wrists who are rocking these guys pretty effectively. So I think the size, they did a good job. They didn't make it too big, and they didn't make it too thick. Omega's Moonwatches tend to be very, very thick. Luckily, using quartz can be much more compact, and so they were able to do that. Next thing, this does actually have lume. I'm going to charge it off camera here. It's not particularly powerful, right? And what we're going to see here is there is definitely strong lume on the hands, and there is some lume on the hour indices. That fades off pretty quickly, but the lume on the hands itself is fine. And so, that's good, right? It's nice that they've made a gesture towards lume here. That's definitely nice, and although I wish they'd put it on a little thicker in the indices, such is life. Next thing, this is a quartz movement, right? This is using a little oscillating quartz crystal to measure the passage of time, along with some little microchips in there, so to speak. What this means is that this is actually going to be more accurate than the original Moonwatch, and certainly even than the modern mechanical versions, right? Certainly modern mechanical watches can be quite accurate, but quartz just generally wins, and in my experience, it has been as accurate as any quartz watches, so on the order usually of around 0.1 seconds per day deviation, which is very, very, very small. So I very much do appreciate that. The accuracy of any quartz watch will beat any mechanical watch, even at many, many times the price. So if you want an accurate Moonwatch, this is the best way to go. Which is a little ridiculous that Omega doesn't do a high-accuracy quartz, but, I get it. They're afraid of quartz still. So there is that. And I guess they have the X33. Anyways, I digress. Next thing, this guy has a battery that is fairly easy to replace. This little earth here is actually the battery door. And so you can just, and I'm not going to do this out of respect for the lone watch, but you can just get in there with a little tool here, pop that off, and then put in a new battery. Pop that back in, and it's good to go, which means you can do this at home, right? You don't need to worry about taking this into a jeweler or anything like that. So it has a very easy-to-replace battery, and you should be able to take care of this for as long as it lasts, right? As opposed to, with the True Speedmaster, you're looking at a service which could cost you several hundreds of dollars, being optimistic, every 5 to 10 years. That's a whole bunch. So I definitely like that. Next thing, I gotta say, the crown here, you can see that they actually have a little tiny bit of engraving on there, where it's Swatch times Omega, basically, is what's in there. That's kind of neat, right? They didn't need to go there, but they certainly did, and I do appreciate that. It is worth noting, though, that the crown is not screwed down in any meaningful way. We'll get back to that later. So that was a nice little detail, as are some of the other nice little case details, right? Like you do actually get the sloped, the bezel here. You do get a little bit of, hints of the original case in there. That's kind of neat. So, they've done some design elements to it. And of course, the dial is a classic Speedmaster dial, except in this case, it's a little bit more blue. So, but again, they have more classic ones like that. Next thing, this guy is a very, very lightweight watch. Even to the extent, I'm not usually a person who says, oh, I want my watches to be heavy, but this revealed that I got a little of that going. This guy is 1.04 ounces on their little bracelet here. It is very, very, very lightweight. Almost disturbingly so. So that is something, though, that if you like a lightweight watch, you will love this watch. This is very, very light. I do appreciate that. They also do have a number of variants, and they have some limited edition ones where they put like a moonshine gold hour hand on it, and then they charge more money for it. I don't get it necessarily. I don't know that I would do that, but it is kind of cool, and it's a way that they can do limited editions that is much less annoying, because it's like, okay, well, we only made these during the full moon of this month. Okay, sure, great, whatever. But if you don't want to do that, you can just go get the regular one and you pay less money. That's how a limited edition should be. It's there for collectors who give a damn, and it's not a problem, and you're not missing out for collectors who don't. So I like that very much. Then finally, actually, that's all the good we got, is that it's got the less annoying limited variants, which is good. It's got an incredible lightweight to it. It's got printing on the crown and some other nice case details here. Easy to replace battery, much better accuracy than the classical Moonwatch. The hand loom is okay, the size is reasonable, and all of the core functionality of the Moonwatch is still there. On the great side, which I'm going to go ahead and warn you is also on the ugly side, is the price. So the price here is $260, and this is a much, much, much more cost-effective way to get this classic design, right? The Omega Speedmaster design is iconic, right? 100%. That is something that has largely due to Omega's marketing around the Moonwatch sort of thing, become a major touchstone in watch circles, right? If you go out to the watch world and you say, what kind of new watch should I buy? People will always say Speedmaster, and there's a reason for it. It's a nice design. And this brings that design, and more specifically some of the more classical variants, although the fashionable ones like this aren't bad either, but it brings that design down to a cost that I think is more attainable for many people, right? $260 ain't cheap, but it is certainly not $8,000, right? And to be clear, you can get $7,000, but it's got a plastic crystal, and I'm not spending $7,000 for a watch with a plastic crystal. Yeah, I know it's the original. Yeah, okay. Anyways, moving on. We'll get there later. But this is a much, much cheaper variant of a very classical design. And by doing it at a price point that is going to be much more achievable for many people, then they are able to make something that is not just cool and different, but is also collectible, right? They have a bunch of different varieties of this, and that allows people to go out there and I'm going to get one of each. Like, wow, that's a lot of money on plastic, but okay, sure, have fun, right? And it allows people to pick one of these guys up in different fashion sort of things, like you've got one for different outfits. I like that, right? That's kind of a cool thing, and it definitely reduces the gatekeepiness of the watch world, right? And so the price here, I'm saying, is great with reference to the actual Moonwatch, whose price is decidedly dumb, right? And it is a very nice way to test to see if you love the Moonwatch design before you even think about the expensive one, right? Wear one of these for a couple of weeks, and if you like the design, you like the handset, you use the chrono, etc., then maybe consider doing the real deal, right? Or otherwise, just stick with the regular one, the Moonwatch, right? The Moonswatch, that is. So anyways, to me, I think the price is great in that it really is reducing the bar to entry to a classical design. It's reducing some of the gatekeeping in the hobby, which is itself a wonderful thing, and it makes it something that can be a little bit more fun and a little bit more collectible. So to me, what's great here is the price. On the bad side, it is a little on the louder side. I'll see if I can get this up to the mic. You might not be able to pick it up, right? But it is on the louder side. It is a quartz movement, and there are quartz movements that are quiet, and there are quartz movements that are loud, and this is definitely a thing where, like, late at night, for instance, if I was wearing this guy, I would just hear as it's going and ticking along. That bothers some people, it doesn't bother other people, whatever, it's a thing to consider. Next thing, as with any of the Speedmasters, because you have all this extra stuff on the dial, the legibility isn't as good as some other watches, for instance, although this isn't actually a tour de force of legibility, right, with the skeleton hands, but it's a little harder to tell just at a glance what the time is. You get more used to it over time, right, but it is not the most legible watch on the face of God's green earth, but that's the case with the OG as well. So that's just kind of what you get into. It is also a watch with no date, which is also the case with the OG. Not a big problem, but it could be something that's a little frustrating for some. Some folks like having a date window on there. Next thing, the purchasing experience on this is decidedly awful. They have gone the hype beast route. Like, we're having a drop today at the Swatch boutique, and you've only been able to buy them in boutiques, which has meant that until a boutique opened up recently here in SoCal, you were simply not able to purchase this watch unless you lived in certain areas of the country here in the US or in the world elsewhere, right? That's a really frustrating approach. And then they are having people lining up, and they were loving it because it's very hypey. It's very like, oh, this is the hottest new thing. And that is a feature for marketers and a bug for literally every other human, right? Just sell the damn things online. Make a wait list. Great, you are on our wait list. When the mission to the moon becomes available, we will ship you one. It's that freaking easy. But no, they wanted to go with the hype beastie consumer hostile supreme approach because it seemed cooler to their marketers. And that's fine. Have fun, but screw you. It's just not a good way to sell watches. I'm sure it sells many watches, but it's not a kind way to sell watches. It's anti-consumer, at least in my experience. So I am done with the whole wait outside the shop thing. And to be clear, these days you can walk in and get them because a lot of the hype has died down. But at the same time, that was very frustrating. I probably would have owned one of these guys, and probably would own one for a while, if I were able to just buy one back in the day. Anyways, moving on. Next thing, this guy is made of bioceramic. Now, I am not a materials scientist. I am not able to speak competently to the exact nature of the bioceramic material. But if you had just said it is made of plastic, I would not have been concerned. Right? This is basically It feels to me incredibly just like boring plastic. And maybe bioceramic is just a term for plastic in this case, but it is just plastic, right? In my perceptual opinion, this feels like a plastic watch. And in fact, like a relatively lightweight, relatively cheapy plastic watch. This is very plasticky in every meaningful sense. The crystal is plastic. This is bioceramic. It feels plasticky. And I don't just mean that in terms of the material, but I mean that in terms of the overall feeling, in the overall approach. This doesn't feel any more luxurious than any of the other swatches out there in the world. To me, in terms of the material, this just feels like a plastic watch. So anyways, bioceramic or not, for me, it is perceptually just a plastic watch. Speaking of plastic, the crystal is a plastic crystal here. They may have another term for it, but it is in that vein. And I know that that was the case on the OG Moonwatch, right? There it made a lot of sense because it's better for it to scratch than to shatter, right? There it made sense for engineering reasons, but plastic crystals are just not that great for daily wear. Some people, oh, well, wait, no, you can polish it at home using a compound. Well, yeah, if you put a sapphire crystal in there, you don't have to polish it because it hasn't scratched up. But already you can see that this guy does have scuffs and scratches. And I didn't touch those up because, again, this isn't my watch. You can use like Polywatch or something like that to get that polished back up. But it's just really frustrating, right? Most watches in this kind of price point are at least using a mineral crystal, which I think is just better than a plastic crystal pretty much always. And at this price, you are getting into the territory where sapphire is a good idea. So I don't care for that, and I think it's unconscionable. I mean, okay, from a history perspective, well, it's just like the one to the moon with the plastic. Like, yeah, it's probably also lubricated with animal fat, but that's a dumb idea now, just like... Anyways, I digress. I don't like plastic crystals, and so it just is worse for daily wear. Keep in mind that you are getting that. That is a demerit, in my mind. Next thing, this strap is absolute hot freaking garbage. It is both Velcro, which is not a very good thing for long-term durability as well as animal ownership, etc. It just feels very, very cheapy. It feels very stiff and thick. It is just not a comfortable bracelet to wear it on. And then coupled with this here is just like, I really, really deeply dislike this bracelet. And the very first step of buying a Moonwatch is finding a strap that actually doesn't suck, right? This makes this look even cheapier. This makes it look like a child's toy rather than a $260 watch. I am just not a fan of this strap, and it is borderline insulting at this kind of a price point, right? Even Swatch Group, in their other kinds of things, makes straps that are better than this. And this just feels like, well, how could we make this feel cheaper to make the other one, the $8,000 one, feel better? I don't like it. It is not great. And frankly, the entire watch feels in many ways like it has been made as cheaply as they could. That's maybe not entirely fair, because they have done some nice things. They've engraved the back parts here. They put the... But in many places, this just feels kind of cheapy, right? There's a little bit of rattle from the buttons on occasion. The free spin, like the water resistance is very low. It just feels like a watch that has been budgeted to death. There feels like there is an insane amount of margin built into this guy, and at some point in time, somebody designed a very, very nice Moonwatch, and then somebody from Omega came in and said, yeah, let's make this worse, right? Between the materials and everything else, I'm just not super impressed with the construction on it, right? It just feels like it is being made, well, frankly, just not well for $260. Speaking of which, this has very, very poor water resistance. This has a 3-bar water resist, right? They just say on the back, water resistant here. But what that basically means, it is splash proof. You should not swim with this. You should probably not wear it out on a rainy day. It'll probably be okay, but yeah, and given it's $250, but it's $250, right? I feel like need to be doing better. And again, people are going to say, but the original Moonwatch is not very water resistant. Yeah, that's a problem there too. They should fix that as well. I don't have that kind of, respect for history, if you will. We should not carry bugs forward in the name of history. But anyways, this is basically a splash-proof watch. You're probably okay if you get splashed by water, but this isn't water resistant in any real serious meaningful way, and you shouldn't trust it at the very, very least. Then finally, actually, no, that's all the bad. We have the poor water resistance. It feels very cheaply made in a lot of ways. The built-in strap is just not good. It's kind of insulting. It has a scratchable plastic crystal. The bioceramic feels to me just like freaking plastic. It is a purchasing experience that is consumer hostile, but hypebeast favored. It's like the sneaker buying kind of thing, right? And then the legibility is not great on any Speedmaster, that is, and it is a little bit on the loud side. The ugly side is the price. Now you're thinking, Nick, how could it be both great and ugly? Well, it kind of depends on comparison, right? But I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but the price is very, very high for the actual quality of the watch that you're getting here, right? $260 is a lot of money for this kind of construction, for what feels to be plastic body, for what feels to be just this strap. Oh my God, this strap at $260, just kick me in the nuts, Omega. It's more honest, right? It just feels very expensive for what you're getting here, and frankly, the price is a little high for it to be a fun gimmick, right? I would feel a lot better buying one of these guys at $125, because then I might be like, well, yeah, actually, I guess maybe since I want to wear something red, maybe I'll wear one that's red, and that would be cute, right? But $260 is a lot to start playing Pokemon with them, right? So to me, the price here feels very, very high, and that is probably the worst thing about this, is that you just don't feel like you're getting very good value for it, even though at the same time, you feel like you're getting great value for it in the great. So let's actually talk about that and jump into my final conclusion. In case it's not clear, I actually feel very conflicted about this watch, right? This is, well, first off, let me acknowledge one thing. My primary area of review is in the world of, for instance, reasonably high-end pocket knives, right? Like, these are the kinds of things that I review on a regular basis, that are chunks of beautiful machined titanium with precision engineering. This is, by the way, by a guy named Rob Johnson's really, really nice piece here. But the thing is, like, most of the time I'm looking at highly tuned machined materials, right? And titanium and things like that. And so I am very much primed to look for solidity, to look for materials that feel high-end and good treatment of those materials. So at some level, I have a bias here. When something is made relatively cheaply and in a way that feels very plasticky, I am less inclined to like it than maybe some people are. If a lot of what you wear are very cheapy, plasticky watches, this will probably feel just in line. But for me, this is very much problematic, and that's one of the things that I like about higher-end luxury watches, right, is that they tend to have a more solid feeling to them. They tend to be made with much more precision, etc. So I will acknowledge I have a bias here. But in many ways, I feel like there were a couple of reasons you might like this watch. To start with, there's a fashion appeal to it, right? Some of these color variants are going to be very appealing to people who have never really been able to get a watch that they love in a bright jade green before, right? That's cool. That's interesting, right? And some of the yellows and the reds are definitely going to be appealing to folks simply on the merit of the aesthetics. They're not really my style, right? I really do think that the original Moonwatch is probably the most attractive variant, although I think I'd do the black Mission to Mercury just so it doesn't feel as much like I'm wearing a plastic version of a classic Moonwatch. But anyways, I digress. The fashion appeal is definitely one reason you would do it. There is also the hype beast effect. There have been a lot of people out there who've gotten swept up in the trend, right, and were waiting outside stores because that was what some of the cool kids were doing, horologically speaking. And you know what? That's an activity you can have. That's a hobby you can enjoy. If you want to be a hype beast, then by God, hype beast. And they gave you a very good opportunity for it, right? That's one thing that the marketing did do. But really, the biggest thing that this guy has going for it, and the reason anybody's talking about this, I feel like, is in the price relative to the Omega. This is $260. The Omega original version, the one that you should probably buy, would be in the $8,000 range. And they have all kinds of other variants, right? Another day goes by, another limited edition Moonwatch. But still, the price relative to the Omega is the big deal here. And in many ways, it's amazing because this is a marked reduction in gatekeeping. Right? The luxury watch hobby is incredibly snobby in a variety of ways. This is one of many reasons why you shouldn't get into watches, right? Do not get into watches. But it is a very snobby place, and it's very easy for people to say, well, if you want a good design, you're going to have to pay several $1,000s. No, absolutely freaking not, right? That's an ugly, ugly element of the hobby, right? For some people, that's exactly why they get into it, but for me, it angers me. And so the idea of being able to have an iconic watch design on your wrist without paying Omega a stupid amount of money for it, that's a beautiful freaking thing to me. I am a big, big fan of that. And more importantly, this is not a fake. This is not an homage, right? If you go on AliExpress and look up Speedmaster, by God, there were lots of people selling counterfeits. There were lots of people selling, oh, well, this isn't, of course, a Speedmaster. This is an Urban Fleet design. It says right on the dial, Urban Fleet design, but it is a Speedmaster in every meaningful way, right? I think it's really tacky to walk around with, those kinds of things, and it's really tacky to support makers that are also making counterfeit goods, right? That's an ugly thing you shouldn't be doing. So I like the fact that you can get now a Moonwatch at a very, very good price that is not a fake, that is authorized, and that is actually giving the people who made the design credit for the design, right? It's tacky to walk around with a fake. It's can be kind of cool for some folks to walk around with one of these things, right? And the people who find it uncool are probably really pretentious. So anyways, that's a thing. This is also a very good idea for, I think, Omega and Swatch to get people who wouldn't ever think about an Omega thinking about Omegas. Right? Maybe you buy a Moonswatch and you fall in love with it, and then in 5-10 years you decide, you know what, maybe I want to do the real deal. Right? I can totally see that happening. And so this could be a gateway into watches for a lot of people, which, by the way, do not get into watches. Anyways, so I do appreciate that, and I appreciate that they're not taking this as seriously. Right? This is a watch that has some fun to it, whereas Omega is a brand that is largely devoid of fun. Right? They just shout Moonwatch James Bond at you over and over and over again until you pay them several $1,000s. Okay, many, many thousands of dollars for a wristwatch. So I appreciate the less serious attitude that Swatch has brought to the table here. And, although some of the other styles are really cool, right? And then bringing in those other fashion, for me, I think I'd probably do the Mission to Mercury if I was going to. Like I said, I like the black case of it. It just feels more honest to me rather than the silver where it's not actually silver. Anyways, so I like the price because it reduces the gatekeeping. It allows this to be more fun. There is a lot of joy in this price point. I also dislike the price relative to the rest of the world. As good as this price is relative to the OG Moonwatch, this price is terrible relative to everything else on the planet, right? Because $260 feels a little unrealistic here to me. People may be saying, but Nick, they've been selling all of them. Clearly it's the right price. Okay, yeah, sure. That's fine. The fact that they can get this much money doesn't mean that they should, right? Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine you took this exact same watch right here. The exact construction, everything, exact same movement, and you changed the hands just a little bit. You changed the dial just a little bit, the chapter ring, so that it was no longer recognizably a Moonwatch. Imagine they did that, and then they tried to sell this at $260. This watch, without the strictly Moonwatch design, would be laughed out of the watch world at $260. People would look at it and just lose it. And that's pretending that it even got into the watch world. In reality, it probably wouldn't even register. It'd be like a $40 per unit advertisement on AliExpress that no one is clicking, right? This, without the Moonwatch style, without those little things that make it Moonwatch, would not even rate, right? And, one can certainly argue that good design is worth good money, and I argue that point on a regular basis. But is it worth $200? That feels really, really expensive to me, right? I don't think that the Moonwatch design is $200 good in this particular regard, right? So this is a thing that feels cheap at one level, but I think that's just because of the price anchoring, which is a psychological effect that when you hear a very high price and then you hear a lower price, that low price feels lower than it would have had you just heard that one price alone, right? This is why a lot of people on their websites will have, MSRP $800 on sale for $100. That feels cheaper somehow than just $100. Right? That is a trick that has been used forever, right? It's why they put the old price on sale notifications rather than just saying, this is the price now. Anyways, so it's that same psychological idea of price anchoring. If you are thinking about this relative to an $8,000 wristwatch, this feels very, very cheap. But if you're thinking about it relative to every other watch in the world at $260, this feels very, very expensive. right? So this is a pricey plastic chronograph, but a cheap Moonwatch. If I were just thinking in terms of construction, if somebody just handed me this watch and the Moonwatch didn't exist, I mean, I would probably go for like 40 or 50 bucks, right? This feels about what the level of build quality is. I mean, seriously. Really? 260 bucks? With this design, you know what? And with the Moonwatch being a thing, I could feel okay about buying one of these guys at 125 bucks. That's being a little generous, but like, okay, Omega gets their cut, right? That would feel pretty solid. I would probably be at the Swatch boutique getting a Mercury right now at 125 bucks. But 260? Yikes. That's a lot of freaking money, right? And so I'm in this stage where if you think about it as a Moonwatch, the price is great. If you think about it as a watch, the price is terrible. And so it can be both of those things, and I just don't know where I stand. And so final conclusion, I am torn. Right? I am thrilled that the barrier of entry to an iconic watch is substantially lower. The watch world is less snobby because of this, and that is good. I also think, and this is a hot take, this is probably the best way to buy a Moonwatch right now, given Omega's hilarious pricing. Right? Like, I want a Moonwatch. I'm going to be real with you here. I want a Moonwatch. As a human, that would be awesome. I was a space kid. I am a space adult. I believe I cried when the last Mars lander successfully landed on Mars. Okay? That's where I am at with this. I am not an astronaut. I will never be an astronaut, but by God, I kind of wish I could be. I am also into watches. This puts me exactly in the Moonwatch target market, right? I am exactly the kind of person who should buy a Moonwatch. Yet, every time I think about buying a real Moonwatch, and I have reviews on my channel, I look at the $8,000 price tag, and I just have this great belly laugh. It's just like, are you kidding me, Omega? Really? Like, even with an AD discount, which you should absolutely get, that is hilariously high. Omega's pricing has been going up, up, up when it has needed to go down, 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 down. Right? I don't even go into Omega boutiques at this stage of my life because if I want to be insulted, I'll just read the held for review section of my YouTube comments, right? It is just not a place that is worth buying from anymore. All of this is to say that unless I win several lotteries to the point where dollars simply don't matter anymore, or Omega realizes they might have gone a little too verblen and it brings the pricing back from the moon, I don't think I'm ever going to own a Moonwatch. Yet, I have contemplated that mission to Mercury so that I have a Moonwatch-style watch, but without that feeling of, God, I paid $8,000 for this? Like, to me, I think that's great, and I think that's the reason why I might end up owning this, and I think that's the reason why a lot of folks might end up owning this, right? Yet, I don't know if I will buy one, even knowing that, you know, 260 bucks, I can swing that, right? Versus $8,000? Yeah, it'd be a real big stretch. I don't know if I will buy one because knowing the watch market, this price hurts, right? This is a really high price for cheap and gimmicky build quality. I get that it is in Omega's best interest to have a ton of quality distance between the actual Moonwatch and the Moonswatch. Like, they did not want this to be too good. And so I get why it is this way. But it feels like it was budgeted and plastic to death, right? I am not a big fan. And the strap, particularly at 260 bucks, feels like a screw you, right? This would have felt like a better value had they not shipped the strap with it, right? This is just not great to me. And, you know, screwing over watch people is well and good, right? We have earned it, right? We are simps who've lost all sense of price by and large. But I think what I'm really bothered by is actually, I worry that they're taking advantage of people who aren't as aware of the watch market at this price point. The Moonswatch, for better and I think for worse, has gotten a lot of people into watches, right? There were a lot of people who realized, like, oh, wow, look at that. People are lined up at a Swatch store. I wonder what they're buying. That must be great. And so people might think, you know, oh, wow, this must be what a $260 watch feels like. And absolutely not, this is not a $260 watch in the watch world. No, there is no shortage of really, really solid watches in metal, in plastic, in any damn thing you want, including chronographs chronographs from folks like Citizen, Casio, etc. for this kind of price point. $260 buys you a lot of watch. It buys you a watch that could be a buy it for life sort of thing in the quartz world. And it could be your everyday watch with joy and could last until until you no longer need to know the time. We'll just put it that way. Right? So this is really, really offensive for $260 looking at the rest of the watch market here. And so you're in this place where it's like, do $260 for this, which with any other dial design, it'd be like $20 on AliExpress, or you get a really high quality, incredible watch from another brand. So ultimately, I kind of think that if you walk into this knowing full well that you are getting taken for a ride on the price point, right? If you walk into this knowing, yep, Omega is about to screw me, and I'm okay with it, then go for it, right? It is great. And by the way, I could say exactly the same thing about every other Omega release. You have to buy them knowing they are screwing you a little bit, right? So in that sense, this is actually very authentic to the Moonwatch experience. But I am not going to tell you that you can't enjoy this, right? I'm not going to tell you this is a bad watch even. It is a fun thing they've done. And if your relationship with money is such that the extra $200 in here really doesn't bother you, or if the design is worth it to you, then by God, go for it. Even do the Pokemon thing, catch them all for all I care, right? That's great. And who knows? I may yet end up with a Mercury myself if I decide that my desire for a Moonwatch is greater than my disdain for giving them $260 for this. I don't know. We'll see. But it's a cool thing that they've done here on the balance. I feel very good about the Moonwatch existing, even at this price point. But if you are just looking for a good watch, if you are just wandering around thinking, I want a cool new watch, then and it doesn't have to have this specific design, then I really don't think that this Moon shines brighter than any of your other options. And you can probably get a strap that's less appalling. Get it? Like Apollo? Okay, I hope that joke gave you a little buzz. Anyways, hope this has been interesting to you. You have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.